The purpose of this sutra is to distinguish between the mental process of predication and observation, induction, or testimony. Predication is the attribution of a quality or action to a subject, by adding to it a predicate. In the sentence, "The man is wise," the man is the subject. "Is wise" is the predicate. This may be simply an interplay of thoughts, without the presence of the object thought of, or the things thought of may be imaginary or unreal, while observation, induction, and testimony always go back to an object. Sutra 10. Sleep is the psychic condition which rests on mind states, all material things being absent. In waking life we have two currents of perception, an outer current of physical things seen and heard and perceived, an inner current of mind images and thoughts. The outer current ceases in sleep. The inner current continues, and watching the mind images float before the fields of consciousness, we dream. Even when there are no dreams, there is still a certain consciousness in sleep, so that on waking one says, "I have slept well," or "I have slept badly." Sutra 11. Memory is holding to mind images of things perceived without modifying them. Here, as before, the mental power is explained in terms of mind images, which are the material of which the psychic world is built. Therefore the sages teach that the world of our perception, which is indeed a world of mind images, is but the wraith or shadow of the real and everlasting world. In this sense, memory is but the psychical inversion of the spiritual, ever-present vision. That which is ever before the spiritual eye of the seer needs not to be remembered. Sutra 12. The control of these psychic activities comes through the right use of the will and through ceasing from self-indulgence. If these psychical powers and energies, even such evil things as passion and hate and fear, are but spiritual powers fallen and perverted, how are we to bring about their release and restoration? Two means are presented to us: the awakening of the spiritual will and the purification of mind and thought. Sutra 13. The right use of the will is the steady effort to stand in spiritual being. We have thought of ourselves, perhaps, as creatures moving upon this earth rather helpless, at the mercy of storm and hungers and our enemies. We are to think of ourselves as immortals, dwelling in the light, encompassed and sustained by spiritual powers. The steady effort to hold this thought will awaken dormant and unrealized powers, which will unveil to us the nearness of the eternal. Sutra 14. This becomes a firm resting place when followed long, persistently, with earnestness. We must seek spiritual life in conformity with the laws of spiritual life, with earnestness, humility, gentle charity, which is an acknowledgment of the one soul within us all. Only through obedience to that shared life, through perpetual remembrance of our oneness with all divine being, our nothingness apart from divine being, can we enter our inheritance. Sutra 15. Ceasing from self-indulgence is conscious mastery over the thirst for sensuous pleasure, here or hereafter. Rightly understood, the desire for sensation is the desire of being, the distortion of the soul's eternal life. The lust of sensual stimulus and excitation rests on the longing to feel one's life keenly, to gain the sense of being really alive. This sense of true life comes only with the coming of the soul, and the soul comes only in silence, after self-indulgence has been courageously and loyally stilled through reverence before the coming soul. Sutra 16. The consummation of this is freedom from thirst for any mode of psychical activity, through the establishment of the spiritual man. In order to gain a true understanding of this teaching, study must be supplemented by devoted practice, faith by works. The reading of the words will not avail. There must be a real effort to stand as the soul, a real ceasing from self-indulgence. With the awakening of the spiritual will and purification will come at once the growth of the spiritual man and our awakening consciousness as the spiritual man. And this, attained in even a small degree, will help us notably in our contest. To him that hath shall be given. Sutra 17. Meditation with an object follows these stages. First, exterior examining, then interior judicial action, then joy, then realization of individual being. In the practice of meditation, a beginning may be made by fixing the attention upon some external object, such as a sacred image or picture, or a part of a book of devotion. In the second stage, one passes from the outer object to an inner pondering upon its lessons. The third stage is the inspiration, the heightening of the spiritual will which results from this pondering. The fourth stage is the realization of one's spiritual being, as enkindled by this meditation. Sutra 18. After the exercise of the will has stilled the psychic activities, meditation rests only on the fruit of former meditations. In virtue of continued practice and effort, the need of an external object on which to rest the meditation is outgrown. An interior state of spiritual consciousness is reached, which is called the cloud of things knowable. See Book 4, Sutra 29. Sutra 19. Subjective consciousness, arising from a natural cause, is possessed by those who have laid aside their bodies and been absorbed into subjective nature. Those who have died, entered the paradise between births, are in a condition resembling meditation without an external object. But in the fullness of time, the seeds of desire in them will spring up, and they will be born again into this world. Sutra 20. For the others, there is spiritual consciousness led up to by faith, valor, right mindfulness, one-pointedness, perception. It is well to keep in mind these steps on the path to illumination: faith, valor, right mindfulness, one-pointedness, perception. Not one can be dispensed with. All must be one. First faith, and then from faith, valor. From valor, right mindfulness. From right mindfulness, a one-pointed aspiration toward the soul. From this, perception. And finally, full vision as the soul. Sutra 21. Spiritual consciousness is nearest to those of keen, intense will. The image used is the swift impetus of the torrent. The kingdom must be taken by force. Firm will comes only through effort. Effort is inspired by faith. The great secret is this: it is not enough to have intuitions. We must act on them. We must live them. Sutra 22. The will may be weak, or of middle strength, or intense. Therefore, there is a spiritual consciousness higher than this. For those of weak will, there is this counsel: to be faithful in obedience, to live the life, and thus to strengthen the will to more perfect obedience. The will is not ours, but God's, and we come into it only through obedience. As we enter into the Spirit of God, we are permitted to share the power of God. Higher than the 3 stages of the way is the goal, the end of the way. Sutra 23. Or, spiritual consciousness may be gained by ardent service of the Master. If we think of our lives as tasks laid upon us by the Master of Life, if we look on all duties as parts of that Master's work entrusted to us, and forming our life work, then if we obey, promptly, loyally, sincerely, we shall enter by degrees into the Master's life, and share the Master's power. Thus we shall be initiated into the spiritual will. Sutra 24. The Master is the spiritual man who is free from hindrances, bondage to works, and the fruition and seed of works. The soul of the Master, the Lord, is of the same nature as the soul in us. But we still bear the burden of many evils. We are in bondage through our former works. We are under the dominance of sorrow. The soul of the Master is free from sin and servitude and sorrow. Sutra 25. In the Master is the perfect seed of omniscience. The soul of the Master is in essence one with the Oversoul, and therefore partaker of the Oversoul's all wisdom and all power. All spiritual attainment rests on this, and is possible because the soul and the Oversoul are one. Sutra 26. He is the teacher of all who have gone before, since he is not limited by time. From the beginning, the Oversoul has been the teacher of all souls, which, by their entrance into the Oversoul, by realizing their oneness with the Oversoul, have inherited the kingdom of the light. For the Oversoul is before time, and time, father of all else, is one of his children. Sutra 27. His word is Om. Om, the symbol of the 3 in 1, the 3 worlds in the soul, the 3 times, past, present, future in eternity, the 3 divine powers, creation, preservation, transformation, in the one being, the 3 essences, immortality, omniscience, joy, in the one spirit. This is the word, the symbol, of the Master and Lord, the perfected spiritual man. Sutra 28. Let there be soundless repetition of Om, and meditation thereon. This has many meanings in ascending degrees. There is first the potency of the word itself, as of all words. Then there is the manifold significance of the symbol, as suggested above. Lastly, there is the spiritual realization of the high essences thus symbolized. Thus we rise step by step to the eternal. Sutra 29. Thence come the awakening of interior consciousness and the removal of barriers. Here again, faith must be supplemented by works. The life must be led as well as studied before the full meaning can be understood. The awakening of spiritual consciousness can only be understood in measure as it is entered. It can only be entered where the conditions are present: purity of heart, and strong aspiration, and the resolute conquest of each sin. This, however, may easily be understood, that the recognition of the 3 worlds as resting in the soul leads us to realize ourselves and all life as of the soul, that as we dwell not in past, present, or future, but in the eternal, we become more at one with the eternal, that as we view all organization, preservation, mutation, as the work of the Divine One, we shall come more into harmony with the One, and thus remove the barrier in our path toward the light. In the second part of the first book, the problem of the emergence of the spiritual man is further dealt with. We are led to the consideration of the barriers to his emergence, of the overcoming of the barriers, and of certain steps and stages in the ascent from the ordinary consciousness of practical life to the finer, deeper, radiant consciousness of the spiritual man. End of Book 1, Sutras 1 to 29 of the Yoga-Sutras of Patanjali, the Book of the Spiritual Man. An interpretation by Charles Johnston. Recording by Maggie Russell, New York, New York. Book 1, Sutras 30 to 51 of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the Book of the Spiritual Man. An interpretation by Charles Johnston. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Maggie Russell, New York, New York. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the Book of the Spiritual Man. An interpretation by Charles Johnston. Book 1, Sutras 30 to 51. Sutra 30. The barriers to interior consciousness, which drive the psychic nature this way and that, are these: sickness, inertia, doubt, light-mindedness, laziness, intemperance, false notions, inability to reach a stage of meditation or to hold it when reached. We must remember that we are considering the spiritual man as enwrapped and enmeshed by the psychic nature, the emotional and mental powers, and as unable to come to clear consciousness, unable to stand and see clearly because of the psychic veils of the personality. 9 of these are enumerated, and they go pretty thoroughly into the brute toughness of the psychic nature. Sickness is included rather for its effect on the emotions and mind, since bodily infirmity, such as blindness or deafness, is no insuperable barrier to spiritual life, and may sometimes be a help, as cutting off distractions. It will be well for us to ponder over each of these 9 activities, thinking of each as a psychic state, a barrier to the interior consciousness of the spiritual man. Sutra 31. Grieving, despondency, bodily restlessness, the drawing in and sending forth of the life breath also contribute to drive the psychic nature to and fro. The first 2 moods are easily understood. We can well see how a sudden psychic condition, flagrantly opposed to the pure and positive joy of spiritual life, would be a barrier. The next, bodily restlessness, is in a special way the fault of our day and generation. When it is conquered, mental restlessness will be half conquered too. The next 2 terms, concerning the life breath, offer some difficulty. The surface meaning is harsh and irregular breathing. The deeper meaning is a life of harsh and irregular impulses. Sutra 32. Steady application to a principle is the way to put a stop to these. The will, which, in its pristine state, was full of vigor, has been steadily corrupted by self-indulgence, the seeking of moods and sensations for sensation's sake. Hence come all the morbid and sickly moods of the mind. The remedy is a return to the pristine state of the will by vigorous, positive effort, or, as we are here told, by steady application to a principle. The principle to which we should thus steadily apply ourselves should be one arising from the reality of spiritual life. Valorous work for the soul, in others as in ourselves. Sutra 33. By sympathy with the happy, compassion for the sorrowful, delight in the holy, disregard of the unholy, the psychic nature moves to gracious peace. When we are wrapped up in ourselves, shrouded with the cloak of our egotism, absorbed in our pains and bitter thoughts, we are not willing to disturb or strain our own sickly mood by giving kindly sympathy to the happy, thus doubling their joy, or by showing compassion for the sad, thus halving their sorrow. We refuse to find delight in holy things, and let the mind brood in sad pessimism on unholy things. All these evil psychic moods must be conquered by strong effort of will. This rending of the veils will reveal to us something of the grace and peace which are of the interior consciousness of the spiritual man. Sutra 34. or peace may be reached by the even sending forth and control of the life breath. Here again we may look for a double meaning. First, that even and quiet breathing which is a part of the victory over bodily restlessness. Then, the even and quiet tenor of life, without harsh or dissonant impulses, which brings stillness to the heart. Sutra 35. Faithful, persistent application to any object, if completely attained, will bind the mind to steadiness. We are still considering how to overcome the wavering and perturbation of the psychic nature, which make it quite unfit to transmit the inward consciousness and stillness. We are once more told to use the will, and to train it by steady and persistent work, by sitting close to our work, in the phrase of the original. Sutra 36. As also will a joyful, radiant spirit. There is no such illusion as gloomy pessimism, and it has been truly said that a man's cheerfulness is the measure of his faith. Gloom, despondency, the pale cast of thought, are very amenable to the will. Sturdy and courageous effort will bring a clear and valorous mind. But it must always be remembered that this is not for solace to the personal man, but is rather an offering to the ideal of spiritual life, a contribution to the universal and universally shared treasure in heaven. Sutra 37. Or the purging of self-indulgence from the psychic nature. We must recognize that the fall of man is a reality, exemplified in our own persons. We have quite other sins than the animals, and far more deleterious, and they have all come through self-indulgence, with which our psychic natures are soaked through and through. As we climbed downhill for our pleasure, so must we climb up again for our purification and restoration to our former high estate. The process is painful, perhaps, yet indispensable. Sutra 38. Or a pondering on the perceptions gained in dreams and dreamless sleep. For the Eastern sages, dreams are, it is true, made up of images of waking life, reflections of what the eyes have seen and the ears heard. But dreams are something more, for the images are in a sense real, objective on their own plane. And the knowledge that there is another world, even a dream world, lightens the tyranny of material life. Much of poetry and art is such a solace from dreamland. But there is more in dream, for it may image what is above, as well as what is below. Not only the children of men, but also the children by the shore of the immortal sea that brought us hither, may throw their images on this magic mirror. So, too, of the secrets of dreamless sleep with its pure vision, in even greater degree. Sutra 39. Or meditative brooding on what is dearest to the heart. Here is a thought which our own day is beginning to grasp, that love is a form of knowledge, that we truly know anything or any person by becoming one therewith in love. Thus, love has a wisdom that the mind cannot claim, and by this hearty love, this becoming one with what is beyond our personal borders, we may take a long step toward freedom. Two directions for this may be suggested: the pure love of the artist for his work, and the earnest, compassionate search into the hearts of others. Sutra 40. Thus he masters all, from the atom to the infinite. Newton was asked how he made his discoveries. By intending my mind on them, he replied. This steady pressure, this becoming one with what we seek to understand, whether it be atom or soul, is the one means to know. When we become a thing, we really know it, not otherwise. Therefore, live the life to know the doctrine. Do the will of the Father, if you would know the Father.